Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Spooky Story Tuesdays with me, your host, Amelia Cotter, and my special guest tonight, Sunshine, the ball python. He holds a very special place in my heart because ball pythons are my favorite snakes, and my very first snake and my childhood pet was a ball python. Some people always ask, how did you get into owning snakes in the first place? And the reason was I was allergic to cats and dogs when I was a kid. And so my mom, who grew up in the house with a bunch of brothers and snakes and alligators in the bathtub and everything, which I highly do not recommend, she said, let's get Amelia a snake. So that's how I ended up researching good pet snakes. And I got my first ball python, whose name was Jim, for Jim Morrison when I was 13. And now this guy is Sunny for Sunshine, and he is probably about 13 years old. He's an older guy. He's got a little injury here to his spine, you can see. He's had a long, strange life. We've only had him for 2 years, so we don't know everything about his story, only that he was up for adoption through the Chicago Herpetological Society after spending a long time in foster care with a really great foster mom, Zarina, and before that he was at a shelter in Chicago where I think he probably encountered some of his issues due to people not knowing how to take care of snakes. So that is the story of Mr. Sunshine, my only sunshine. Other snake enthusiasts laugh about the name Sunshine because ball pythons actually notoriously live down in the burrows of other animals, and they spend a lot of time not necessarily like below ground, but they're usually well hidden, and they're ambush predators. So he would not be in the sunshine very much in his native home of sub-Saharan Africa. And there on my back, you can see I have a tattoo of a ball python. And that was my first ball python, Jim Morrison. And then, of course, I have my other special guest of the week, Oscar, doing his obscene grooming as usual. If you hear him in the background, although he seems to be settling down, he provides a nice soundtrack for us. So welcome. And tonight we have a special lineup for you guys. I got or for you folks, I should say, I got a request from my friend Brenda for her birthday. Happy birthday, Brenda. She wanted to hear some stories about lighthouses and mirrors, which are two of her favorite haunted topics. So I did some research on that, and I think I found some cool stories for us to share. I also finally, after all these weeks, have more current reading to share with you. And the first thing that I wanted to share that I am about to start is called Surviving Death. A journalist investigates evidence for an afterlife. This is like a New York Times best-selling author. And this came highly recommended to me by another friend, so I'm looking forward to devouring that. And then on a different note, the other book is a poetry book and memoir called The Home Place, Memoirs of a Colored Man's Love Affair with Nature by J. Drew Lanham. The other book is by Leslie Kean. And I saw Dr. Lanham speak at a meeting of the Chicago Ornithological Society, because yes, we belong to both, the birds and the reptiles. And he is an amazing speaker, an amazing writer, an amazing poet. And as you can see, I'm wearing my glasses, and I keep doing that weird thing with my nose. So enjoy. All right, folks. So my lineup, real briefly, we are going to start with, what did I decide to start with? We're going to go in alphabetical order. We'll start with lighthouses. I'm going to read some passages from Maryland Ghost tonight. That's the book that I wrote. And I have, of course, one story from the Scary Stories series because it just wouldn't be right if I didn't. And then I have another fun story from the Possessions book, of course, that will have to do with a haunted mirror. And now a word from our sponsors. I do want to remind you that if you are enjoying the Scary Story Times that you are hearing here, that you will also love Scott Marcus's Facebook Live that he has on Wednesday nights, and those are usually at either 6 or 8 p.m. That is facebook.com/whatsyourghoststory. And then on Fridays, Haunted Galena at facebook.com/Haunted Galena. They do a little Facebook Live cast at 6:30 p.m. and Galena is one of my favorite haunted places in Illinois. And then on Sunday, and these are all Central Times, on Sunday you can tune into on YouTube. There is the YouTube channel called, what is it called? Oh no, Scott Marcus here. It's the See You on the Other Side, but that's what it is. See You on the Other Side podcast. See You on the Other Side. And those are some friends of mine, Mike and Wendy, who have their own band called Sunspot, and they talk about ghosts. So how can you go wrong? You can't. All right. So I'm going to secure my little friend Sunshine here, and then we will get started with the stories. All right. So I also found 2 stories that I'm going to read from you online. So if you see me zone out staring straight into the computer, it's because I am looking at the screen as I'm reading to you. But I did just want to share some info from about our first stop of the evening, which is going to be Point Lookout State Park in Scotland, in St. Mary's County, Maryland. So I wanted to stick with the Maryland theme for Brenda since she lives there. So this is also supposed to be one of the most haunted lighthouses in the world. And I'm not going to read the story. I'm just going to read the passage about the lighthouse, because this story actually goes into some whole other territory, which you can find out if you read the book. Anyway, during the Civil War, the land that Point Lookout State Park currently occupies served as a Union fort, as well as prisoner of war camp and hospital for captured Confederates. More than 5,000 soldiers were imprisoned there in tents, and about 4,000 of them died. Today, the park is abuzz year-round with campers, hikers, swimmers, and fishers enjoying the surrounding Chesapeake Bay and Potomac River. But remnants of the Civil War and those who suffered remain, including the original Fort Lincoln, a 4-sided earthen fort constructed for the defense of Point Lookout, and plenty of ghosts. I took a trip to the park with one of my best friends, Jen, and a couple of our other good friends in the late summer of 2003, when few visitors were around and it was chilly enough to wear a coat at night. Each of us was, and still is, a history and paranormal enthusiast. We planned to spend the night in a cabin and explore the grounds, see the Point Lookout Light, the park's famous haunted lighthouse built in 1830, and go crabbing the next morning. And maybe I'll share that full story with you the next time, but I wanted that to be a simple segue for us to read about the ghosts of Point Lookout. And I am getting this from the actual Maryland Department of Natural Resources website. All right, here we go. One of the most well-known and reputedly haunted sites at the park, the Point Lookout Lighthouse, still stands. No longer in use, the lighthouse first came into existence in 1830 as a 1.5-story wooden and masonry building. In 1883, another story was added to 2 housekeepers and their families, allowing the arduous duties involved in lighthouse keeping to be shared. Keepers of previous generations did not enjoy the advantages of automatic alarm systems to alert them if the light went out, or mechanical means for ringing the fog bells. If weather was foggy for a week, the bell had to sound constantly, so the whole family had to take turns ringing. Point Lookout's lighthouse was active for more than 135 years until the Navy purchased it in 1965, after which an automated light was placed offshore. It remained tenanted until 1981. Over the decades, there have been numerous reports of paranormal experiences within Point Lookout State Park, but none more so than in the lighthouse itself. These reports eventually reached the ears of the internationally renowned parapsychologist, Dr. Hans Holzer, along with his team of paranormal psychologists. They were the first to investigate the lighthouse some 20 years ago. To this day, it remains the only Chesapeake Bay lighthouse to have earned such esteemed scrutiny. Holzer's team successfully recorded 24 different voices in the building, both male and female voices, singing and talking, often using quite colorful language. One comment, "Fire if they get too close to you," was thought to be a reference to the great number of Confederate soldiers in prison nearby. A female voice recorded on the tower staircase and believed to be that of Ann Davis, wife of the first keeper, spoke of my home. Yet another voice said, "Let us not take objection to what they are doing." Lighthouse visitors, including Dr. Holtz's team, have experienced very chilly air in parts of the building, along with a rotten smell emanating from one particular room. Oddly, as soon as Dr. Holzer made public his belief that the smell was from the tormented spirits of people held there against their will, those falsely accused of spying or having Confederate sympathies, the smell disappeared. In addition to unusual sounds and smells, many spectral visitors have also been reported, such as that of Ann Davis, standing at the top of the stairs in a white blouse and long blue skirt. What's it doing over there? Several unexplained images have appeared in photographs, the most well-known being that of the ghost of Point Lookout, taken during a seance in the lighthouse in the late 70s. In the photograph, Laura Berg, a former lighthouse resident, stands in the center holding a candle. To her left, the foggy form of a man in soldier garb, weapon, sash, one leg casually crossed over the other, appears to be leaning into the wall. Interestingly, this image was not noticed by those attending the seance. It was only seen later in the photo. Need more evidence? Consider the following tales by Ranger Donnie Hammett, longtime manager of Point Lookout State Park, as he personally experienced them. And these are his words. The incident I am about to relate occurred on an unseasonably warm day in March of 1977. I had been a park ranger at Point Lookout for only 2 months. Although mine was a new job, Point Lookout was not new to me. I had lived my lifetime of 25 years in the Point Lookout area. I was working the evening shift. It was a weekday, and despite the beautiful warm weather, there were few park visitors. At about 4:30, I was on the Potomac River beachfront gathering and recording weather data when I noticed an elderly woman standing about 40 yards from me. She caught my attention because she was strangely shuffling along, looking toward her feet. She appeared to be desperately looking for something she had lost in the grass. After I had watched her for about 5 minutes, I walked over to offer my assistance. My first thought was that perhaps she had lost her keys. She seemed very distant, and our conversation was very brief. I only remember 3 points she made. She did not need my assistance, she lived up the beach a ways, and she asked if I knew where the gravestones were that used to be where we were standing. I remember that for some reason I felt I was imposing on the woman, and not wanting to be an imposition, I left to walk 300 yards east to the Chesapeake Bay shore to record more data. About 5 minutes later, while I was walking back to my truck, which I had left parked near the river, I noticed that the woman had disappeared. It was then that I realized the adjacent parking lot was empty. Furthermore, from my vantage point, since our conversation, I would have had to have seen any cars entering or leaving the area. None had. I did not conduct a search for the woman, though I often wish I had done so. A few hours later, I asked then park manager Jerry Sword if he knew anything about a graveyard near the Potomac River picnic area. He wanted to know why I was asking, so I told him about my odd encounter with the old woman. After Mr. Sword heard my story, he told me that there had once been a graveyard somewhere near where the mysterious lady had been wandering. It was the Taylor family graveyard. Its exact location is no longer known, but its former existence is well documented. Records show that one of the individuals buried in the lost graveyard is Elizabeth Taylor. Evidently, someone had come across the missing burial site and stolen her headstone. Elizabeth Taylor's grave marker was found in a local hotel by a Point Lookout park ranger. Some years later, my mother, Regina Hammett, and I went to the site where I had talked to the old woman. We searched for signs of a graveyard using metal rods to probe down through the sand. Within minutes, we located a rectangular rock-like form under about a foot of sand. Soon we located several other possible gravestones laid out in regular rows as one would expect. However, when we dug up a couple of these objects, we discovered they were concrete foundations of an 1860s Civil War warehouse. The Taylor family cemetery has never been found. Could the strange woman have been the deceased Elizabeth Taylor searching for the rest of her family? And another story. On several occasions, I have witnessed a man running across the road through Point Lookout. The sightings always took place during the day on the same section of road, and the man always crossed the road just after my truck had passed, causing me to view him in my rearview mirror. The man was always crossing in the same direction. Other rangers have experienced the same phenomenon while passing in other vehicles at different times of day and at different times of year. The first time I saw the man, I immediately returned to the crossing site. The man was running using long strides. He first appeared at the edge of the road adjacent to one of the Point Lookout camping areas. He crossed the road and dashed into the woods on the other side, leaving the park property. My first thought was that he was a trespasser fleeing the area. I examined the area but wasn't able to find any type of path on either side of the road or any evidence of human or animal crossing. I did not get a good enough look at the intruder to identify him or describe his attire. The site of the man's crossing is very near, but not in the original Confederate soldiers' cemetery, used to bury prisoners who had died of smallpox at the nearby smallpox hospital where sick Confederates were held. Had the man been making the same trek during the Civil War, he would have been running a route taking him directly away from the smallpox hospital. Reportedly, Confederate prisoners would trick their Union guards into sending them to the hospital and then would attempt an escape through the same woods from which I had seen the man flee. Could the figure have been the spirit of a Confederate prisoner who escaped from the smallpox hospital only to die in the nearby woods, having himself been infected with the deadly disease, as often happened? All right, and one more. And this comes to us from Laura Berg, who was mentioned earlier as a former resident of the lighthouse. The first night Ms. Berg spent in the lighthouse, she was awakened to the sound of heavy or old-fashioned boots walking up and down the hall. She also relayed that one of the rooms had a very bad odor at night. Some mornings she heard a female voice at the top of the stairs singing. She never could tell what song it was, but it seemed to be a very happy one. Sometimes she heard the sound of men laughing and talking in the south side living room. Whenever she checked for intruders, she found no one. She only actually saw something one time, 2 figures in the basement. They were transparent, and Ms. Baird couldn't tell if they were male or female. Before moving into the lighthouse, Ms. Berg learned of the strange things that happened to the former park manager, Jerry Sword, during the time he lived there. Mr. Sword frequently heard snoring in the kitchen. At times he would hear voices outside of the back of the house, but when he checked, there was no one there. Then he would hear voices in the front yard, and again upon checking, there was no one to be found. This happened frequently. One evening, he actually saw figures of men going through the house. Ms. Berg also learned that numerous fishermen throughout the years had heard calls for help on the water, only to discover that there was no one to be found. All right, so that is from an article called Spirits of Point Lookout that is on the Maryland Department of Natural Resources website. And it's literally dnr.maryland.gov/pages/spirits-of-point-lookout.aspx. I sound like Captain Holt if you watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Okay, so I have one more lighthouse story to share with you guys. It's playing with my mouse here. Okay. If anybody has questions about the snakes, let me know, because I couldn't see my computer, or I couldn't see the Facebook screen while I was reading from the other screen. Okay, cool. All right. So it's funny, Brenda, because the other lighthouse story that I have to share comes from my Maryland Ghost book, and it's actually the one that you submitted. And this is about the Concord Point Lighthouse in Havre de Grace in Harford County, which is close to where I grew up in Maryland. All right. Let's see if we can keep this guy under control here. Okay. The Concord Point Lighthouse and Keeper's Dwelling were built in 1827 and are located at the confluence of the Susquehanna River and Chesapeake Bay in historic Havre de Grace. Concord Point Lighthouse is the second oldest lighthouse in Maryland and one of the oldest lighthouses still in continuous operation on the East Coast. I investigated the Concord Point Lighthouse in 2012 with my team, G-Force Paranormal. In March 1994, a young man by the name of Lance Allen Miles, age 34, was found dead outside of the keeper's dwelling, having suffered bullet wounds to the abdomen and head. He was found by the lighthouse caretaker, John O'Neill. According to the Havre de Grace Police Department, the body looked as if it had been dumped there, not killed there. The basement of the keeper's dwelling is where most of the paranormal activity has taken place, mainly noises, footsteps, and voices, and that's where most of our activity happened. We use the spirit box down there, which is a device that utilizes radio frequencies to generate spirit voices. The radio scans continuously on AM or FM, and voices can come through. We had a very clear male voice come through the box, answering our questions as we asked them. We figured the voice was that of Lance Miles. 2 particularly moving and eerie responses we got were when he asked how he was killed. He answered bad and help. We left that night with many more questions than answers. And that story comes to us from my friend Brenda, and that's a photo that she took of the lighthouse. Sorry, I'm doing this one-handed. And the caption is, an investigator's shadow stretches ominously across the nighttime facade of the Concord Point Lighthouse in Havre de Grace. All right. Let's move on to haunted mirrors, shall we? All right, let's see. Just hoist him up here. He's pretty heavy, this guy, so he's like a good 5 pounds, so he can just kind of sit like a little block there. And he's usually pretty chill. He's doing a lot more exploring tonight than he usually would. All right. This story comes to us from More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and it's called A Ghost in the Mirror. And this is the accompanying illustration, another one of my favorites from this series. I would stare at this when I was a kid and totally freak myself out. And it's actually more of a set of instructions than it is a story. So you all can report your findings and let me know if you try it out after this. All right, this is a scary game that young people sometimes play, trying to conjure up a ghost in their bathroom mirror. Many don't really believe that a ghost is going to appear, but they try to raise one anyway for the fun and the excitement. Some are willing to settle for any ghost, but others have a particular ghost in mind. One of these is a ghost named Mary Worth, who is also known as Mary Jane and Bloody Mary. She is the heroine of an old comic strip, but some say she actually was a witch who was hanged at the infamous witch trials in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. Another one of these ghosts is La Llorona, the weeping woman who wanders the streets of cities and towns from Texas to California and throughout Mexico looking for her lost child. Still another is Mary Wales, a young woman who is supposed to have been killed in a car accident in Indianapolis, Indiana, about 1965. Her ghost is one of the vanishing hitchhikers. And that's interesting since we also have Resurrection Mary here in Chicago, who was seen from the 1930s up through today. It is said that again and again she thumbs a ride home in a passing car, then vanishes before she gets there. Here's how ghost hunters try to raise a ghost. Everybody take notes. 1, they find a quiet bathroom, close the door, and turn off the lights. 2, there are only 2 steps. 2, while they stare at their face in the mirror, they repeat the ghost's name, usually 47 times or 100 times. I think this is Alvin Schwartz just messing with these kids. If any ghost will do, they say any ghost in place of a name. If they do manage to raise one, its face will slowly replace their face in the mirror. Some say a ghost is likely to be angry at being disturbed. If it gets angry enough, they say, it will try to shatter the mirror and come into the room. But a player can always turn on the lights and send the ghost back to where it came from. And when that happens, the game is over. I actually would be very curious to hear anybody's stories about that from when they were kids or otherwise, because I remember we used to do that all the time when I was a kid. We would do Bloody Mary. We would do a lot of different exercises trying to conjure up that ghost in the mirror. So let me know. And now I'm going to refer back to my computer screen awkwardly with this fun article that I found while I was doing research on haunted mirrors. There's a CNN article from 2013. It's a CNN business article, mind you, and it's called Apparently This Matters: Selling a Haunted Mirror. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. This haunted mirror sold on eBay for about $150, because what could possibly go wrong? I'm fairly certain there's nothing haunted in my house, save maybe the leftover Super Bowl cheese dip still in the fridge. But so far, its intentions seem friendly. You just have to ignore the constant paranoid screams from the tofu. It wants my soul. Shut up, tofu. It's great writing. It's not entirely uncommon for me to have these lively conversations with my food. I probably need a girlfriend, or a hobby, or years of therapy. Fortunately, though, since the worst of my supernatural household concerns is confined to the lingering spirit of old Velveeta, I do sleep fairly well at night in the 2 square feet of bed space kindly allotted to me by my dog. Quite simply, I respect the demon cheese. The demon cheese respects me, and my dog respects nobody, which is far better, than what could have been said of 2 flatmates in London who recently sold an antique mirror on eBay because they were convinced it was haunted and willfully endangering their lives. According to their eBay listing, it all started out when one of them saw that the building's landlord had put the old hallway mirror out on the lawn as rubbish. So, being resourceful, he retrieved it, added some silver paint, and leaned it up against their wall above the radiator. Soon after that, things supposedly got weird. We both experienced what I can only describe as intense, sharp, stabbing pains, the sellers wrote to prospective buyers. They would strike us both at the same time. The 2 flatmates also complained of waking up completely drained of energy, screaming in the early morning hours with horrible feelings of impending doom. Though, to be fair, that kind of sounds like my typical weekday, only with fewer tears and significantly less self-doubt. Regardless, this is the point where one of them should have turned to the other and asked, how about we just throw it away? But that would be too logical. And besides, the sudden emergence of blood was sort of interesting and new. Yes, blood. You see, in addition to growing increasingly sick and depressed from all the evil hauntings, one of the flatmates even claims to have woken up with deep, bloody scratches for which he blamed the mirror and kindly provided a link on eBay for photographic proof. And I just clicked on that link and it is long gone. It's also entirely possible that he just has a pet cat, or perhaps an amazing lover, or both. Whew, what an article. All right, of course, any potential buyer would need to believe such humorous nonsense as haunting pains and bloody scratches in the night. They presumably would also require an itchy PayPal trigger finger, the kind that leads you to bid on a used toilet brush at 3 a.m. Whew. With the mirror, it was all about finding that absolutely perfect buyer, and the sellers noted that they would ideally like it to go to somebody who has experience with the paranormal, supernatural, and knows what they are getting themselves into. Amazingly, thanks to the power of the interwebs, there was no shortage of interest, and for everyone's amusement, a few potential bidders began asking entirely reasonable questions of the sellers. They were, I'd like to buy this as a present. If I win the auction, is there any way you could deliver it to my ex for me? Eventually, the mirror sold for £100, or a little over $150. So good on them. Well played. As a result, I plan to list everything I sell in the future as potentially haunted. In the end, it doesn't really matter whether the mirror was evil or if their stories were even mildly believable. What matters is that somebody paid for the simple possibility, and I love that. It's important to have a few good conversation pieces sitting around the house, and nothing sounds better than explaining how you bought a haunted mirror off 2 random guys on eBay. All right, I skipped over some more of his bad jokes, but I found that entertaining for a few reasons. All right, and I have one more story for us. So I always promise to keep it to a half hour and then I drone on and on. So tonight I'm actually going to keep it fairly close to half an hour. And this is another great story. So last week we had an awesome story called Jonathan's Special Chair from the book Possessed Possessions, I say it every time, by Ed Akonowitz, who is a famous Maryland folklorist. And tonight this story is called Goblins in the Mirror, and it comes to us from Hanover, Pennsylvania, southeast of Gettysburg. And my grandparents used to live in Hanover, Pennsylvania. I think I still have family there. All right. Hanover, Pennsylvania, southeast of Gettysburg, is one of those old mid-Atlantic country towns with a central business district rapidly being surrounded by an expanding circle of suburban developments and shopping malls. But if you travel the back roads toward the famous battlefield to the north, you can catch fleeting glimpses of the past, a troubled time more than 130 years ago when blue fought gray in a battle many consider the turning point of the war between the states. A lot happened here, Tilly said, probably because this whole area was involved in the Civil War battle. The Hanover wife and mother was carefully setting the scene for the story she was about to tell. a tale so strange and troubling that her daughter would not discuss the events she had experienced. In fact, Tilly said the younger girl had blocked many of the horrifying incidents from her mind. Several years ago, Tilly explained, when her daughter was 18 years old, she and a roommate moved into a small apartment. It was located in the center of town, above an old general store. There had been rumors that ghosts roamed the building, but Tilly said there was hardly an old structure in Hanover whose owners didn't claim to have a few restless spirits. We helped Paige move in. Soon afterward, we brought her an antique dresser, Tilly said. The piece was about 50 years old, and the wood was a light blonde color. It had several drawers and was built low enough to support a large mirror that filled the area above the dresser's wide, flat top. When you looked into the mirror, the reflection was distorted, said Tilly. Your image was odd, not clear. Even when you moved from side to side, the view was never completely right. One time when I was visiting, I actually thought I saw a small red light in the mirror. It seemed as if it was coming from way in the back, but I thought I was crazy. Several strange things seemed to occur in both the apartment and the hall entrance that came up the enclosed narrow set of stairs from the street-level exterior door. Once, Paige and her friend awoke in early morning darkness to find a young girl sitting at the foot of Paige's bed. Apparently, the small, unexpected guest was trying to talk to the other two roommates. They could see the child clearly, and her mouth was moving, but neither girl could hear anything. The same little girl, dressed in 1920s-style clothing, also appeared on the stairs and was seen by several other family members who happened to be visiting at the same time. Paige's first experience with the mirror occurred when she was sitting at the foot of her bed, gazing across the room at her distorted image in the old glass. Suddenly, she stopped combing her hair, walked slowly toward the glass surface, and began to focus far into the depths of the mirror. Leaning over the top of the dresser, she moved closer to the glass surface. It was then that she saw a horrifying face, very tiny and distant. Paige pressed her face against the reflective glass to get as close as possible to the surface to get a better look at the creature. As the figure began to come into focus, Paige noticed that there were no longer glowing eyes in the sockets of the face, only a pair of deep black holes that formed two tiny dots of inky blackness. She told us all about it, Tilly said. She also said she saw some kind of demon in the mirror. We never questioned her. We believed her. She was never one to make things up for the sake of attention. We began to worry when Paige broke out in a horrible rash, Tilly said. It was all over her body. Sometimes she actually took the mirror off the back of the dresser and kept it out of view, behind the dresser. Then there was the phone call. That was horrifying for all of us. Tilly said Paige called her and was hysterical on the other end of the line. She was shouting, begging her mother to come to the apartment, saying there was something in the room and that the demons were trying to get her. Tilly drove like a wild woman. Arriving at the old building, she took the steps 2 at a time and found her daughter huddled at the doorway of the apartment, shaking and sobbing. She was out of control, Tilly said. She was shouting, "Don't go back into the bedroom. It's still there. It's going to get all of us, and it will get you too." Tilly moved her daughter aside, went down the apartment's short hallway, and opened the bedroom door. Immediately, Paige raced in from behind. She passed in front of me and started twirling, spinning around like she was possessed, Tilly said. Her head jerked back and her eyes rolled up toward the top of her head. She was spinning around in circles, very fast. My heart was pounding. I actually saw her starting to rise off of the floor, as if something was pulling her up into the air. I was afraid she was going to be dropped or fall and hit her head against a piece of furniture. I pulled her out of there and took her home with me. Tilly and Paige's roommate got rid of the dresser within days. Today, nearly a decade later, her daughter doesn't remember much of that horrifying period. Or if she does, Tilly said, she won't talk about it. I believe all this is possible. I think the unexplained does happen. I saw the red light appear in the mirror once. It was in the morning, but I feel all of this was caused by someone who had died in the building, and I figured the restless spirit was still around. After Paige left the apartment, I often wanted to go back and ask the new people who lived there if anything happened, but I never did. And that's that. All right, folks, those are all of my stories. Let me check and see if I have any questions here in the comments. I would be interested, Star, in hearing about how you traumatized your cousin. I we'll have to talk about that someday with the mirror tricks. Definitely had some interesting times with my friends too when I was a kiddo doing that kind of stuff. And I just want to say happy birthday again to Brenda. So tonight's theme was lighthouses and mirrors. And tonight's theme was going to be my stories and my personal experiences, but we still have next week to go for that. And then I guess we'll be hearing about whether we're going to stay on lockdown here in Illinois, to see if we'll continue doing these every Tuesday or if I might move them to every other week, or we'll see how that goes. As most of you know by now, I was let go from the planetarium along with about 60% of the staff, and so it's not that all that extra time will go away. I've picked up some freelance work. If you need help writing resumes, or you need somebody to review your LinkedIn profile, apparently I am a person who can help you out with that, since I am a writer. I'm working on 2 books. I'm working on a lot of projects, and I'm staying busy, and I'm grateful to have that work. And I'm also very grateful to have this time doing these stories. So I would like to continue with them, and I'll assess what I want to do with these in the future. And especially if we are going to be continuing to stay home here in Illinois and elsewhere beyond the end of May. So thank you all very much. This was Sunshine, everybody. Sunshine the ball python. He thanks you as well, and I think he's had a pretty good time this evening, but I'm sure all he wants to do is go back and hide under his little rock. So join me again next Tuesday, and have a wonderful week wherever you are. I hope it starts to be sunny and warm for you. Okay. Bye, everybody.